By all accounts, it seems like Sony wants to continue working with Marvel Studios on future Spider-Man projects, and of course end up crossing everything over with the help of Kevin Feige, helping them oversee what would have been their own standalone universe. Now, of course, with the multiverse getting introduced and everything going in many different directions, it sounds like Sony wants to continue crossovers with the MCU, but they also want more benefit, including the use of more MCU characters. I think it's safe to say that whatever Sony decides to do with the future of their collaboration with Marvel Studios, only fans will really benefit in the long run, because it does seem like Sony has their mind set on working with Marvel Studios and trying to give everybody one huge giant crossover universe where anything could happen if you can just think of it, sort of like the comics have done for decades. Now, of course, when it came to the last couple years, the two have had a rather shaky relationship that almost ended up falling apart after Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, of course, things have changed. Marvel Studios seems to be helping Sony, Sony's willing to play more ball with Disney, and everything seems to be on good footing now. Now, recent news and reports from reliable insiders have suggested that Sony wants to continue a big partnership that would also benefit Sony a lot more in the long run. This being the fact that Sony wants to use more MCU characters in all of their standalone films, meaning that they're looking to possibly use non-Spider-Man related characters that Marvel Studios would be developing in upcoming spin-offs. So for example, let's say the Winter Soldier in Venom 3. They want the ability to do something like that. Now, when you start thinking about it, you would think that this would all benefit Sony, but I honestly don't think that's 100% true. Because again, if we remove Spider-Man from the MCU, you're removing a lot of elements that have already been set up, and it would just seem like the character goes missing, then we have to pretend like he never existed, because legally, that's exactly what they would have to do. So it puts them in an interesting position, and you can see how Sony would definitely benefit from having more MCU characters, but you can see how the MCU benefits by having Sony and even potential crossover down the road. Because again, who's to say that Sony can't strike a deal where the Spider-Man films are the ones testing out new characters, or maybe even old characters? Maybe Kevin Feige isn't comfortable with using Punisher or Daredevil or Luke Cage in the core MCU, but they can strike a deal where these characters can maybe team up with Spider-Man to fight Morbius or somebody down the road. Again, there is this potential there for Marvel Studios to be able to test extra characters on top of the ones that they already have an agreement with Sony for, meaning the two they previously had, because we know previous contracts called for the fact that Sony could use 2 Avengers to appear in Spider-Man films, which of course they have. So again, it's an interesting position and a way to look at it in that way, as to both companies would benefit one another for different reasons. And here's the thing, right? Let's say a couple years from now, these two companies are working closer together. If Sony strikes a deal with an MCU star and they're allowed to use them in, let's say, Spider-Man 4, like let's say Deadpool, for example, or maybe one of the X-Men when the X-Men are established, that doesn't use up a MCU appearance. That is an appearance that Sony pays for, which of course they did with Robert Downey Jr., giving him $25 million for less than 10 minutes of actual screen time. So again, there is a lot of benefit here for Marvel Studios and Sony to both pursue a deal like this to continue working together. And seeing how they're already working together and hashing out many deals, it's really not going to be surprising that if we get to a 4th, 5th, or 6th Spider-Man film and we see more or less half the Avengers appear in it, because that's sort of what they're aiming for, and seeing how box office is going to have a hard time recovering, you're going to need a lot of star power to drive tickets. It's just kind of a no-brainer.